Back on track or backtracking? President Trump holds a cabinet meeting amid continuing fallout over his summit with President Vladimir Putin. Protecting elections. Lawmakers look at ways to punish Moscow if it interferes in 2018 midterms. Holy holiday. The Vatican's most visible resident is on vacation. A staycation. And reaching the goal. The boys' soccer team players rescued from a flooded cave are speaking out. On EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, July 18th, 2018. It's day 2 of damage control in the continuing debate about Russian meddling in U.S. elections. The White House says President Trump believes Russia would target U.S. elections again. This comes hours after he appeared to deny Russia was still targeting the United States, a statement at odds with warnings from his top intelligence chief. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. Dan Coates, the director of national intelligence, says Russian meddling is ongoing and has warned Russia could interfere in the 2018 midterm elections. And many are still critical of the president after his summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin. But the president says nobody has been tougher on Russia.
Look at the numbers, look at what we've done, look at sanctions, look at ambassadors not there, look, unfortunately, at what happened in Syria recently. And I think President Putin knows that better than anybody, certainly a lot better than the media. He understands it, and he's not happy about it, and he shouldn't be happy about it, because there's never been a president as tough on Russia as I have been.
The president has been receiving criticism for his press conference with Russian President Vladimir Putin on Monday, when he said he saw no reason why Russia would interfere in the 2016 presidential election, despite the fact that U.S. intelligence agencies have confirmed Russia carried out cyber attacks. The president later retracted his comment and said he does accept U.S. intelligence findings. I asked Mercedes Schlapp, the White House Director of Strategic Communications, if the damage has been done and if it could impact midterm elections.
Why should American voters be concerned about those comments as they go to the polls?
They should not be concerned. He clarified his comments. He made it very clear that he stands firm with the intelligence community, and he's made it very clear that that he accepts their findings in terms of the Russian election meddling. It's not just Russia; it's other rogue entities that are also involved in our Russian election meddling.
Mercedes Schlapp repeating what the president has said, that others could also be involved. And today, Press Secretary Sarah Sanders says the White House is aware of others who have made attempts to meddle, but she said she could not get into details. Lauren?
Mark, many people are asking why didn't the president directly condemn Vladimir Putin and Russian meddling when he had the chance yesterday at their press conference?
Well, in that Monday press conference, that's right. People are asking why he didn't directly condemn them. The White House says it's the president's actions that count, though. The press secretary today mentioning the ongoing sanctions against Russia for cyber attacks, the expulsion of 60 Russian operatives from the U.S., and the president's authorization of those military strikes on the Putin-backed regime in Syria. She laid out all those examples today. Lauren.
White House correspondent Mark Irons, thank you. Joining me now is Congressman Louis Gohmert, a Republican from Texas and a member of the House Judiciary Committee. Welcome to the program, sir.
It's great to be with you, Lauren. Thank you.
What do you think about President Trump's retraction yesterday? Do you think he needed to do that?
I know a small part of what he knows about other players in the election, and I know he's aware he never colluded with the Russians to change the election or to win the election. But all of that has got to go into his mind. Gee, if I say there's Russian collusion or there's Russian participation in our election, they might take that, interference, they might take that to mean that, yes, I know I worked with them to interfere. So that's a tough line for him to walk.
In an interview, you said both the U.S. government, Department of Justice, as well as the Russians, as well as other countries, were trying to influence our election. What evidence do you have to support that?
We know for certain our intel community provided that information to both Peter Strzok and Dean Chappelle.
So what you're saying here is you believe that it is not just the Russians who interfered in our election in 2016. Right. And let's move on.
Sure.
So at a House Judiciary Committee hearing, you grilled FBI agent Peter Strzok about partisan text messages that he sent while working on the Russia investigation. You pressed him about his extramarital affair and received a lot of criticism.
I did not talk to him about his extramarital affair.
All right, tell me what you said.
What I brought up after he had testified in his private deposition that he always told the truth, that he never lied, and any witness's credibility is always an issue. And so when the witness says he always tells the truth, he never lies, it is completely admissible, even in a trial court in front of a jury where our rules of evidence are at their strictest. It's totally appropriate to show that he is a liar and that he has lied to us anytime he says, I always tell the truth, I never lied. What was really relevant is the fact that he said he always tells the truth, and yet he looked in his wife's eyes over and over and over and lied to her, and he's very, very good at lying.
Do you know that
That's
for
all
a fact?
Relevant.
Do you know that for a fact?
Absolutely do. Absolutely
do.
All
right. Let's talk about the incivility, however. Is that something that is appropriate for a representative to be talking about on the floor? Everybody, mainstream media was saying, this hearing is a blockbuster, it's over the top. We were talking about things that weren't relevant. So do you believe that bringing that up is incivil?
That kind of reaction tells us exactly how far down this country is gone morally from the Ten Commandments, from the biblical perspective that we once had. At one time, the Ten Commandments were very important. They were considered to be sacrosanct. We based most of our laws on the Judeo-Christian laws and the Ten Commandments. But in the 60s, that began getting inroads. And of course, the first 4 commandments have gone by the wayside as far as our Supreme Court's concerned. And obviously, adultery has gone by the wayside. In previous administrations, that's not a big deal anymore. And I understand people don't think that's a big deal anymore. If you believe what the Bible talks about, it's still a big deal.
Thank you so much, Congressman. We're running out of time. I'm so sorry.
And thank you.
Thank you.
No. Thank you for your interest in my perspective. I appreciate it very much.
I appreciate you coming on to the program. Congressman Louis Gohmert, a Republican from Texas. Thank you.
Thanks.
Lawmakers are taking this Russia threat seriously, and they're proposing ways to protect the 2018 midterms. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi has been asking senators how they'll keep votes secure. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. U.S. officials say the threat of interference is real. This past weekend, the Secretary of Homeland Security warned state election officials that Russia is trying to use social media to create division among Americans. Now a couple of bipartisan bills to prevent interference gain steam. What does Congress need to do now to protect the midterm election?
Good question.
111 days before Americans go to the polls, and senators from both parties say the country must be on guard.
I mean, we cannot take for granted that the Russians are going to take a time out, for this election. I think they're going to be after us again, and not just the Russians. It could be other sources.
The Senate Majority Leader is issuing a stern warning to Russia and threatening new sanctions.
There's a possibility that we may well take up legislation related to this. In the meantime, I think the Russians need to know that there are a lot of us who fully understand what happened in 2016, and it really better not happen again in 2018.
Another GOP leader says sanctions are needed as Russia ratchets up attacks.
And what this ought to be is a warning shot that causes Congress and the country to get prepared, because they're going to keep escalating their efforts until they can affect the outcome of the election.
And America's top intelligence chiefs agree. They told the Senate in February the threat from Russia is real.
Yes or no, do you agree with Director Pompeo that we haven't seen a significant decrease in the Russian activity, and we have every expectation, I think Director Coates, you've already alluded to this, that they'll try to continue to intervene in our elections in 2018 and 2020.
I agree with Director Pompeo.
This is not going to change or stop.
Yes, it is not going to change, nor is it going to stop.
I agree with Director Pompeo.
Democratic leader Chuck Schumer urges the Senate to take up more legislation to boost security for U.S. elections. Every single House seat and a third in the Senate this fall are up for grabs. Lauren?
The president sparked a firestorm during a joint press conference with Vladimir Putin, as we have been talking about, saying that he denied meddling in the election. What is the latest on that part of the controversy?
The Senate is calling Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to testify. There's still a lot of questions about what happened before and then exactly during President Trump's 2-hour private meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi. Thank you, Jason. The Holy Father's ambassador in Nicaragua is calling for an end to violent clashes in the country's capital. The appeal comes after more than 3 months of fighting that has left hundreds of Nicaraguans dead. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby reports.
Less than 20 miles outside Managua, Nicaragua, young people fire homemade mortars at police. But within hours, the rebels are outgunned by government loyalists. Since mid-April, these streets have been a battleground. Forces who support President Daniel Ortega have clashed with opposition groups who are demanding his removal. On Tuesday, pro-government police retook Masaya, a suburb of Managua that has become a symbol of the conflict. Protests against President Ortega escalated after he announced social security cuts. The UN is calling for an end to the violence, which has left at least 280 dead.
The appalling loss of life in Nicaragua must stop now. It's imperative that the Nicaraguan state, which has obligations under international human rights law to guarantee the right to life and security of the population.
The Apostolic Nuncio, Archbishop Valdemar Stanislav Samartag, says the fighting is a tragic moment for the country. In a statement, the Vatican ambassador warns violence won't lead to peace, saying, "Obviously, it is unacceptable to think that the dead and victims of violence can solve the political crisis and guarantee a future of peace and prosperity in Nicaragua." Pro-government forces have targeted the Catholic Church, which is trying to broker peace. Cardinal Leopoldo Brenes, Archbishop of Managua, was attacked by armed groups while trying to disperse a mob outside a basilica last week. Today, Vice President Mike Pence is demanding an end to the, quote, state-sponsored violence against peaceful students, church leaders, journalists, and civic leaders. Wyatt Goolsby, EWTN News Nightly. 12
people are dead after government forces bomb an area held by rebels in southwestern Syria. The offensive comes after talks between the opposition and Syrian forces failed. Officials say more than 100 people were injured. The Turkish Coast Guard is searching for survivors after a boat carrying migrants capsized near Cyprus. While 100 survived and have been airlifted, at least 19 people are dead and 26 are missing. A Turkish court today denies a request to release an American pastor who is accused of aiding terror groups and engaging in espionage. According to Reuters, Andrew Brunson told the court, "The disciples of Jesus suffered in his name. Now it is my turn. I am an innocent man." U.S. officials speaking outside the courthouse said they are deeply concerned about the 50-year-old's health. Brunson has been in jail since last October and faces 35 years in prison. Coming up, a conservative policy expert makes the case for paid family leave. Plus, a $5 billion fine for an internet giant. Presidential advisor and daughter Ivanka Trump speaks out today, again pushing for a national paid family leave plan.
There is a ton of research to support why paid leave is just good policy. It supports family cohesion, family bonding. It's important for maternal health. It's important.
Trump says she's optimistic Congress will pass legislation to allow families to take paid leave for the birth or adoption of a child. She led this discussion at the Bipartisan Policy Center with former Senators Chris Dodd and Rick Santorum. In terms of Catholic teaching, there's room for disagreement on this issue, and the church leaves the faithful free to make their own judgment. U.S. bishops say on their website, public policy should protect people who have to take time away from their jobs to handle serious family responsibilities. In his encyclical about work, published in 1981, Pope John Paul II wrote, quote, "The true advancement of women requires that labor should be structured in such a way that women do not have to pay for their advancement by abandoning what is specific to them and at the expense of their family." Joining us now is Aparna Mathur, resident scholar with the American Enterprise Institute. She's co-director of the AEI Brookings Project on Paid Family Leave. Now, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
FMLA, the Family and Medical Leave Act, requires that 12 work weeks of leave in a 12-month period for people who want to have an adoption or a birth of a child, to care for a spouse, a child, someone with serious health conditions. Why is paid leave more important than unpaid, especially when small businesses can't afford it?
Right. I mean, that's a great question, I think, which was the initial reason why the Family and Medical Leave Act left out small businesses from its purview. It basically said we don't know how small businesses will deal with a situation where, the federal government is mandating this leave. But what we're seeing increasingly in the paid leave laws that are coming across states and in talks with small businesses is that they're increasingly willing to try to offer paid leave to their workers, because these are situations that, their employees are facing, having a baby, having to take care of someone in their house, having to take leave for own illness. And so it's not something that they can be left out of. And they're increasingly looking to the federal government for solutions on how to offer paid leave to their workers.
Well, today here in town, Ivanka Trump says that she is optimistic that legislation is going to pass. And I know that Senators Rubio and Ernst looking to fund paid leave through Social Security.
That's right.
Is that a good idea?
So we're seeing increasingly a lot of talk around town about trying to do paid leave through Social Security. It is an interesting funding mechanism because it doesn't require us imposing new taxes on workers. It's basically saying, look, you've been paying into Social Security, and now you have the ability to withdraw from it at times of need, especially when you're having a baby. So I think there is increasing consensus that this might be one way to start to offer paid leave to employees.
But is the role of the federal government to remain neutral in regards to parents' decisions to stay home and work outside the home? Cutting taxes, getting bigger paychecks would help American families more. Is that right?
Yes, so what we're seeing now is that the fact that we don't have paid leave is really hurting low-wage workers. It's really not a choice for them to stay home and stay away from work, even when they have a baby, because you just can't afford to lose a job and you can't afford to lose a paycheck. And so I think what paid leave does is that it really offers them that option. If you decide to go back to work, that's fine. If you're staying home, we're still giving you a certain number of paid weeks so that you have that time to spend with your family. So I think it offers and expands the choice that people have.
And the Archdiocese of Chicago began offering paid family leave in 2016 to show support for pro-life and pro-family policies. But again, either through Social Security or through taxes, who is going to bear the cost for this?
And that's a great question. In fact, as part of the AEI Brookings working group, that was a question that we spent a lot of time discussing, because if you start imposing these costs on businesses, you might start seeing more discrimination, again, especially against hiring women. So the solution that we came up with was that we said it should be an employee payroll tax. So employees are earning the benefit and they're paying into it just like they pay into, for Social Security and other public programs. So I think doing it through a tax on employees is one of the solutions, and we're seeing that at the state level, where states have programs that are working out great for workers and for businesses.
Another tax.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Aparna Mathur with the American Enterprise Institute.
Thank you so much for having me.
Up next, a $5 billion fine. And the boys rescued from a cave in Thailand speak out. The European Union has fined Google a record $5 billion for violating laws aimed at protecting consumers from predatory business practices.
These practices, they have denied rivals a chance to innovate and to compete on the merits. They have denied European consumers the benefit of effective competition in the very important mobile sphere.
The internet giant has been ordered to stop the practice within 90 days or face additional penalties. Google says it will appeal. It's Wednesday, and typically in St. Peter's Square, pilgrims are gathering for the Pope's public audience, but the Holy Father is on vacation this month. Vatican correspondent Juliette Lindley joins us from Rome. Juliette, the Pope has been out of the public eye. What's he doing?
Lauren, as Romans escape the heat of the city in droves, Vatican City's most notable resident is very happily going absolutely nowhere, Lauren. The pontiff is resting, reading, sleeping in, we understand, and listening to music at his home in Casa Santa Marta, inside the Vatican walls. Now, he's having what you might call a staycation, Lauren, and he hasn't, however, completely disappeared. Now, over the last weeks, he's attended a handful of official events, including a one-day trip to Bari in southern Italy, the funeral of French Cardinal Jean-Louis Torrent, and tomorrow he's going to be taking part in a gathering of cardinals in Rome to approve several saints' causes. The Pope has said in the past that summer vacation is a way to detach from daily concerns to help re-energize one's body and one's spirit. And as for pilgrims who might have wanted to see the Holy Father, but they couldn't see him on a Wednesday, they can still see him on Sundays when he says the Angelus in St. Peter's Square.
Okay, that doesn't sound like much of a staycation to me, but okay. He is really upending tradition by going on vacation in July. Isn't most of Rome off in August?
Yeah, well, since the 1600s, popes have been going to the Papal Retreat of Castel Gandolfo just outside of Rome to spend the hottest period of the year. There's a beautiful palace by the shores of a small volcanic lake, and it's surrounded by lush gardens. John Paul II and Benedict both also used to spend their summer holidays there, and they were known to take some time off in northern Italy and to go for hikes in the mountains for some R&R. But interestingly, you know, since Pope Francis hasn't been using Castel Gandolfo at all since he took office in 2013, the Vatican has opened up the palatial apartments to the public, and visitors can tour the palace and they can see for themselves the papal apartments, which until this papacy had always been off limits.
I always remember my trip to Castel Gandolfo when Pope John Paul II was there, and so we were all piled under this tent. I have never been more hot. Juliette, next month, the Pope will be back to work, but I kind of think he's back to work already. Anyway, what's on his agenda?
Well, he has a lot on his schedule, Lauren. First of all, he'll be resuming his general audiences on Wednesday, and he's also going to be doing the Angeluses on Sunday, and then he has to prepare for the upcoming World Meeting of Families. It'll take place at the end of the month in Ireland, where families from around the world gather to pray and to reflect on the importance of family for society and for the Catholic Church, Lauren.
And of course, EWTN and EWTN News Nightly will be there. Juliette Lindley, EWTN News Nightly Vatican correspondent, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Lauren.
Finally tonight, a story that you cannot help but love. The 12 boys and their soccer coach rescued last week from a flooded cave in Thailand are speaking out. They left the hospital and they are ready to take the field again. Doctors say they're healthy. The group appeared at a news conference with some of the Navy SEAL divers who saved them. One boy says the 18-day ordeal taught him not to live life carelessly. Others say they want to become Navy SEALs so that they can help others. And I read that one other boy said that he tried not to think about food, especially fried rice. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Let's keep in touch online. Follow me at Lauren Ashburn on Twitter and Lauren Ashburn EWTN on Facebook. Good night and God bless you.